At 91, Greer Garson, you will never have to deal with those people because I have lived long enough to avoid them. Hollywood is a mean place. Understand that people can forget mean things said and done to them, but they can never forget the scars on their soul. At age 91, Greer Garson, one of Hollywood's biggest stars, decided to speak out. What she is about to say is not just stories, but the scars on her soul that not even Hollywood's bright lights could erase. The people who ruined her career and life, the ones who pushed her into the shadows and made her endure a lifetime of silence, now she has nothing left to lose. So who are the most vile people in her life, and why has Greer Garson, who was once a symbol of beauty and talent, held hatred in her heart for so long? Get ready for a journey full of anger, betrayal, and unimaginable battles where a strong woman will reveal those who deserve to be forgiven. Greer Garson was born in London, England, on September 29, 1904. Her parents, Edgar L. Garson Richard Ney, who worked in the food industry, and Nina Ney Sykes, who ran a home, were not artists, and she was their only child. Greer Garson became one of Hollywood's greatest icons in the 1940s and 1950s. Greer entered Hollywood in the late 1930s, a time when women still faced significant prejudice and pressure. Her career began when she appeared in the film Goodbye Mr. Chips 1939, instantly impressing both the audience and producers. Her fame peaked when she starred in Mrs. Minver 1942, a film that won 6 Academy Awards including Best Actress. She was honored as the Goddess of Hollywood, a symbol of grace and elegance. However, success and fame never come easily. Beneath the glitz and glamour, a series of scandals and tragedies slowly consumed her life. One such tragedy was her marriage to Richard Ney, a man 10 years younger than her. Their relationship faced harsh criticism from the public as they were seen as an odd couple and incompatible. After 5 years they divorced. The media relentlessly reported on their broken marriage, especially the rumors that Ney married her to gain fame after her divorce from Richard Ney in 1949. Greer Garson married E. Bob Barrett, but their marriage was unhappy, and they split up in 1959. Greer Garson was also famous for her troubled relationship with Clark Gable. It was one of the most interesting love stories, but it caused a scandal, and their relationship was talked about in the media, which hurt her career because people always compared her to other famous rivals in Hollywood. In the 1940s and 1950s, directors, producers, and Hollywood moguls would often trick actresses into sleeping with them in exchange for a leading role. Greer Garson was also affected by this, but she refused to take part and was left out of important projects. This caused problems in her relationships and put her at risk of being left out of important projects. Hollywood wasn't just a place of glamour, it was also a place of inner battles. After her fame and movies like Mrs. Minver, she felt alone and isolated in the film industry, where she had to deal with constant pressure, betrayal, control, and suffering while competing with other actresses. She hated them, the ones who pushed her into the shadows and made her endure a lifetime of silence. So who are the most vile people in Greer Garson's life, and why has she hated Richard Ney, who she saw as a symbol of beauty and talent, for all these years? Richard Ney: he is the man I regret the most in my life. Greer Garson once gave her heart to Richard Ney when she was at the peak of her career. She thought their love would overcome all obstacles, that age didn't matter as long as the feelings were genuine. But as with everything in Hollywood, the truth was always different. Ney, a man 10 years younger than Greer, entered her life like a whirlwind, sweeping her into a fantasy of eternal love. In 1943, Greer Garson married Richard Ney, and immediately the press buzzed about their relationship. A young man and aging star united in a marriage deemed odd, quirky, and under public scrutiny. But then Greer said with indignation, "He never loved me for who I am. He loved what I had, the fame, permanence. He never truly cared for me. He just wanted to live in the shadow of my success. He only wanted a perfect picture of a happy life that he never truly wanted to share with me." Katharine Hepburn's marriage only lasted 5 years before it ended in anger. "I gave him everything I had. I loved a man whom I thought would be with me until the end of my life, but he chose a different path, a path that led him to betrayal and deceit, and from that moment on I understood that love is never a one-way sacrifice." So why couldn't she forgive Richard Ney? He not only took advantage of her love, but he also took advantage of her career, which she had worked hard to build. He wasn't the man she used to trust, he was just someone who wanted to use everything she had to further his own goals. The first man is over, but there are 4 more to go. These are the people who turned Greer Garson's life into an unbreakable chain of tragedies. Let's keep going because her story has even more surprises and pain to offer. Katharine Hepburn, the one who could never accept competition. Katharine Hepburn was not just a rival, she was a nightmare throughout my career. She wasn't a friend, but she wasn't exactly an enemy either. She was someone who could never accept me standing on equal ground with her. Katharine Hepburn, a Hollywood icon, a talented and sharp actress, but for Greer Garson, Hepburn was someone she could never forgive. Although both were major stars, their relationship was always a covert battle, a silent struggle that only Greer truly felt. From the moment Greer Garson entered Hollywood, people began to compare her to Katharine Hepburn. Both women were prominent, both were outstanding actresses, and both had strong personalities, but this constant comparison created an impossible relationship. Hepburn could never accept anyone standing on the same level as her, especially Greer, who was seen as a formidable rival. Every time Greer embarked on a new project, Hepburn would find ways to nitpick her acting. "You can't act like I do, you'll only be a weaker version," Hepburn said during one encounter. These words were not just cruel judgments but also a blatant display of superiority and jealousy. Whenever Greer won an award or landed a major role, Hepburn would make harsh remarks like, "She's just a temporary choice, no one will remember her." One of the most memorable times in Greer Garson's life was when she won the Oscar for Best Actress. But as she walked on stage and saw Hepburn's eyes in the crowd, she felt cold, as if her great shadow was overshadowing her. Hepburn didn't say anything, but those looks said it all. "Surely I could never have a career like hers." Greer was angry and said, "Katharine was always the one who was favored." Katharine Hepburn never thought anyone deserved to stand on equal footing with her, and I was one of those considered to be the weak one in her eyes. Greer Garson was successful in many areas and was praised on the big screen, but Katharine Hepburn always put a big question mark next to her achievements. This rivalry made Greer realize that no matter how successful she was, she would always be in the shadow of someone who wouldn't accept competition. Marlon Brando, the liar and the haughty one. Mark Anthony Brando, the great Hollywood star known for his talent and captivating looks, is said to have changed the film industry with his roles in The Godfather and A Streetcar Named Desire. But for Greer Garson, Brando was not the idol she had hoped for, he was someone she could never forgive. When Greer first met Marlon Brando, she thought he would be a colleague she could work with and learn from, but from their first interactions, she knew Brando was not only talented, but also incredibly cocky and self-centered. When they got to the set of an important scene, Greer asked Brando to help her make a shot that would be visually impressive and powerful. But Brando was stubborn from the start. He not only refused to help, but he also did everything he could to make Greer feel like a failure while they were working together. "Work with her, she's just an overly adored actress. You think you can teach me how to act?" he casually told the whole crew. At a key point in the scene, Greer had to ask Brando to move to change the angle, but Brando yelled, "I don't need to do what you say, you're just a part of this movie, not the director." He stood there haughtily, ignoring Greer's feelings and continuing to act in a way that made it seem like he couldn't be hurt at that moment. Greer felt like a pawn in Brando's game. As she was about to leave a meeting with the film crew, Brando challenged her, "You can't leave like that. Who do you think you are to decide everything? You don't deserve that role, you're just a pretty face." Greer was hurt by these words so badly that they wouldn't heal. It took her years to get over them. He wasn't just selfish, he was thoughtless, only caring about himself and destroying things that didn't belong to him. "I thought I could learn something from him, but I was wrong." Marlon Brando was a famous actor in Hollywood, but Greer Garson thought he was the most smug, rude, and disrespectful person she had ever met. Loretta Young, on the other hand, was a fake and jealous Hollywood star who Greer Garson used to think of as a friend but who ultimately betrayed her the most. Loretta walked up to Greer and said, "Do you really think you deserve this award?" The words, "You're just a choice for a supporting role and no one will remember you," said Loretta, hit Greer hard and felt like a slap in the face. Greer stood there still feeling like the ground beneath her feet was disappearing. She hadn't expected Loretta to publicly tear her down like that, and it made her feel even more betrayed. But that wasn't all. Greer was about to sign a contract with a major producer. Loretta quietly snuck in and convinced the producer to fire Greer by offering herself as the lead. She then hurt Greer's reputation by saying that she was just a safe choice. Loretta did everything she could to ruin the chances Greer had worked hard for her whole life. When Greer found out Loretta's plan to steal the role, she lost it. In a meeting, she stood tall, looked Loretta in the eye, and said, "You can have all the glamour you want, but in my eyes you will always be nothing more than a petty person." Greer Garson never forgot how it felt to be let down by someone she thought was her friend. Loretta Young didn't just stab her in the back. She tried to erase all the marks Greer had made on her, and Greer never forgave her 5 years later. The controlling and betraying Frank Sinatra was a wolf in sheep's clothing who led me to believe that love could fix everything only to tear me apart in the end. Every woman fell in love with Frank Sinatra's legendary voice, but Greer Garson's relationship with him was a nightmare she would never want to remember. At first, she thought her relationship with Sinatra was a beautiful love story, but she quickly realized that he wasn't the perfect partner she had hoped for. When Greer and Frank started dating, he would say sweet things to her that made her feel like she was the only woman in the world. There were changes all around. Sinatra, with his charming and dashing persona, not only started to control her every move but also made her live under his watchful eye. He never let her have a life outside of him. Whenever Greer decided to work on a separate project, Sinatra would get in the way, even telling her to turn down important opportunities. For example, when Greer got an offer to star in a major movie, Sinatra not only didn't congratulate her but also found every way to make her turn down the offer. "You can't go make that movie," Greer said. "I can't bear it when you're away from me. You think you can make decisions on your own?" "No, Greer, I'm the one who decides your life," Sinatra said in a stern voice one evening as Greer was getting ready to meet with the director to talk about a script. Sinatra then suddenly showed up at the director's house and threatened to not let her go without his permission. He said this while looking at her with a cold, commanding gaze. When Greer said she didn't want to go to a party Sinatra had planned, he lost it and slammed his hand on the table, yelling, "You can't live without me you're nothing." Greer realized at that moment that Sinatra's love wasn't freedom but possession and tyranny, and she was being crushed by the man she had once loved. "I once thought he was a man I could trust, but he not only took my love, he also took my dreams and my career, and I can't forgive that I loved him and let him take everything I had, but never again," she said. Sinatra was the last person Greer Garson could never forgive because he controlled her life and made her a ghost in her own.